Use surfaces to replace faces. In this video, we'll use replace face. In Fusion 360, we want to get started with the supplied dataset complex box. This complex box contains a box and a surface. We want to talk about some tools that allow us to replace the top face of this box with the surface that we're looking at. If I view this from the right-hand side, we can see that the surface is a simple extrude that's made up of a line and a large arc. But the process will be the same no matter how complex your geometry is. When we want to take a look at replacing a face, if we go to Modify, we have a tool called Replace Face. When we select Replace Face, we first need to select the source faces and the target faces. When we do this, the source will be the top of our box. I'm going to select Tangent Chain, and the target faces are going to be the surface bodies. When I do this, it's important that I select surfaces that extend past the face that we're replacing. This is the only way that Fusion will be able to actually extend the geometry up to our selected surface. Let's say OK, expand our bodies folder and hide the surface. So what we've done is we've taken that extrude and we've taken it up to that surface. Of course, there are multiple ways that we could do this. We could use our sketch and we could extrude up to that object. So if we hide body 1, but we show sketch 1, and we show our surface body, we can use extrude to take that up to a distance of to object. Keep in mind that there are some options, for example, adjacent face, but because we're dealing with an arc, in some cases it actually wants to carry that arc around. Fusion 360 is intelligent in the fact that it knows what we're trying to do and it extends the tangency of that edge out. But this doesn't work in all cases. In some cases, replace face might be the only option. Well, let's see what happens if we make some modifications to this design. First, let's take a look at adding some fillets. To do this, I first want to roll back before the replace face, and I'm going to begin modifying this body before I make any selections. So if we just add a large fillet on these corners, let's say 15 millimeters, and then we roll back past the replace face, notice that it is still able to extend that. The original face that we created here is still valid. Even though we've rounded the corners off, that selection is still there. But what happens if we add a fillet to the upper edge? In this case, I'll add another large fillet, 15 millimeters, say OK, and let's roll this back. Well, Fusion was still able to extend that. Because there was still a single face selection in the center, it was able to bring that geometry up, including the fillet. So it carried the fillet and it propagated around the new replaced face. Let's take a look at what happens if we were to try and shell this. Now, before I do that, I'm going to go to Inspect, and I'm going to create a section analysis that's going to go right through the middle of this. Then I want to go to Modify, Shell, and select the bottom face, and I'm going to have a 1 millimeter wall, something that's extremely thin. So I've created the shell, and then I drag this ahead to the replace face. Notice what happens. It extends the geometry, but it does not carry that internal face with it. The shell is still in its original position because it was calculated before the replace face. One thing that we can do, however, is we can drag these around. If we shell after the replace face, you can see now that we have that consistent 1 millimeter wall thickness, and it does respect the new face position. So while some things will be able to be updated based on replace face, like fillets on the vertical and the horizontal edges, there are certain features that are still going to be timeline dependent. Things like shell, because it's not going to recalculate the shell based on the new position of that top face, but it will carry those fillets up with it. At this point, let's navigate back to a home view. We can hide the analysis and minimize our folders. Make sure that we save this design before moving on.